welcome to the next episode of DDR, a podcast all about your favorite Drow, Drizzt Do'Urden. My name is Justin, and in this episode we'll be diving deep into part 2 of Sojourn, titled The Ranger, discussing all of our favorite plot points, characters, and more.
And my name is Jeffrey. Of course, since we're huge fans of Dungeons & Dragons, we're also going to be discussing the chapter and how it relates to the tabletop game in our Dungeon Delve section.
Following along with the show is easy. Just grab a copy of the book, read the next part of the book, and tune in every week. But remember, we want to hear your thoughts too. You can share your dim lights with us at drizztdoneright@gmail.com.
Or, better yet, be part of the ongoing discussion on our very own Drizzt Done Right Drizzt Court.
Love it.
The invitation, linked inside the podcast description. And as always, if you raise an interesting point, we're going to bring you up on the show. I mean, we just had... Recently, Valeria was talking about exposing her class to some of the more technical aspects of D&D during a creative writing class. Evidently, they didn't know that Dark Elves were called Drow. And that made me wonder, Justin, were these books your first introduction to Dark Elves? Because, like, for me, I know it was, so it went hand in hand that I learned about the term Drow and Dark Elf together.
You know, I'm not totally sure. It's right around the same time, right around when I first bought... The Thousand Orcs is when I started playing Elder Scrolls, what was it, 3? Morrowind?
Yep.
And so I don't know which one came first. But
sometimes I get that, the Mandela effect, where like I know it, but how long have I known it?
No, like I always played a Dark Elf in Morrowind, in Oblivion, and in Skyrim. I mean, I've done a few other races as well, but I always tend to go back to Dark Elves, to the Drow. And so I know it was Drow in Morrowind. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know where I learned it first.
Interesting. I always love little things like that. I mean, we also had Scott. He was telling a story about going to see one of my favorite movies. It was Monster Squad.
Nice.
They had, I guess, an actor from the movie showed up as well. So he was able to, they did a little Q&A with the actor from the movie.
No, that's so
and
cool.
the audience. Yeah. And then he was able to also get an autograph. He said he had the guy autograph it, kick him in the nards. Because the whole part is like, they're like Wolfman. And so like this movie is about these kids who have like a treehouse. They hang out and they're called the Monster Squad. And they find out ways that they would fight monsters. It's just like what little kids would do, right?
Right.
And at one point they're like, well, if the Wolfman showed up, what would you do? He's like, well, I'd kick him in the nards. Like, bro, Wolfman doesn't have nards. And so they have this whole argument. And then turns out monsters are real. And the Wolfman shows up and he yells, kick him in the nards. And the kid kicks him and the Wolfman goes, oh. Wolfman has nards. So a little bit of an inside joke because you have to see the movie, but it really made me giggle when he saw it. So I was a little bit jelly.
Oh yeah.
But for all the listeners, look, we really love getting to know the Dim Light Squad a little bit better as we go through these books. You're all amazing. So listeners, remember, come join the family so we can get to know you too.
Totally, absolutely. Well, let's see. Here we are, part two of Sojourn. It's actually been a while since we recorded part 1, Jeffrey. So what's going on? What's new?
Well, we're traversing these technical difficulties I've been going through lately.
Yeah.
So that's added to it a little bit. But no, I mean, other than that, just been kind of busy juggling work and the responsibilities around the house and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So nothing crazy and adventurous. I haven't gone on any quests looking for any treasure chests lately, but
oh man,
maybe.
We did.
Yeah?
Oh, man, we did. And I don't know that I even told you about it, but I took some pictures, and I'm going to be sharing those on the Drizzt Cord.
Okay.
My wife and I took our kids down to West Virginia this past week, and we spent the week up on top of a mountain, but we also spent a little bit of time inside the mountain. Went dungeon delving in some caverns. I wore my Drizzt Done Right shirt. Took some selfies with me and my daughter in the Underdark.
Nice.
It was really fun. She was terrified the whole time. Because
I mean, she definitely, probably being a big fan of the show, knows the Underdark is a dangerous place to be.
Exactly.
Luckily, you were there to protect her.
It was really cool though. Like literally, like you opened the door and it was just like cold air coming out. It was just like, whoa! Yeah. It felt like a refrigerator. And
Yeah.
but it was, probably mid 60s. Fahrenheit, that is, not Celsius for our international listeners.
It'd be a totally different mid-60s.
Yeah. And it just, you're in a totally different world when you're under there. So
Yeah, being underground has always been kind of ominous to me. Like
yeah.
where I'm from, or we're originally in Pennsylvania, where we're from. You have what is it, Crystal Caves? It's
Yep.
not too far from you.
Went there a couple times, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like same idea. You go in and see these big stalagmites and
Yep.
stalactites. You got to know the difference. And just to feel that damp, dank coldness, like it could be 80 degrees outside, but you walk in there and suddenly, like you said, it's like you've got central air conditioning down there. It's been left on for too long.
Exactly. But yeah, they did turn out the lights. I feel like they have to do that on any good cavern tour, right? They turned out the lights and you can't even see the hand in front of your face.
No.
I knew it was coming. I didn't tell my kids about it because I'm just like, if I tell them about it, they're going to be freaking out about it the whole time.
Right.
And yeah, after that, they want it out. They're just like, nope, we're done. We are done.
Like, what is this magic you have brought? No, it cast a globe of darkness over us, Dad.
Exactly.
Can't do it.
Exactly. But yeah, other than the cavern, we spent a lot of time just relaxing. Jeffrey, I read a book. Other than this one, which I mean, like, that doesn't happen all the time. One of the reasons why I wanted to start this podcast with you was to make sure I got through these books. I'm not that much of a reader, really.
Okay.
But I sat down just about every day with a book written by Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Okay.
Cosmic Queries. And,
Nice. I have his Astrophysics for People in a Hurry.
Oh, nice. Man.
I don't know if you guys got it for me or if Mom and Dad got it for me, but it was definitely a Christmas present last year.
Oh, I forget. Yeah, I don't remember who got me this book, but yeah, it was a Christmas present as well, and I just finally got to it. But his writing is so awesome because he writes just like he speaks.
Yep. It's one of the things I've enjoyed about him. He can come off a little pompous sometimes when you see him in podcasts.
Right.
And, look, he's got a great intellect, undoubtedly.
Oh, yeah.
But the way he relates severely intelligent in things is like anybody could understand it.
Totally.
And so I just love that about it.
Yeah, totally.
I feel like sometimes you listen to like Stephen Hawking and he goes into a black hole explanation. You're like, wow, that guy's smart, but I don't get it. But then like Neil deGrasse Tyson is explaining to you that there's infinite infinites. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
Well, there's like, infinite that we know, and then the infinite beyond that we can't actually know. I was like, huh? But then he'll break it down and it just really makes sense.
Yeah, he paints a lot of pictures where it's just like an analogy to it. And it's like,
yes.
Oh, okay. That kind of makes sense. And you can kind of piece things together in your own head in a way that you can understand. But
he is also a hard follow on X if you enjoy movies, because he will shred the reality of a movie, like BB-8, the Star Wars movies.
Right. Yeah.
And so I love having people, what is it, like hashtag ruined my movie or whatever they'll do. Like,
yeah.
Like he talks about it sometimes on the podcast. He'll go out. He's like, look, I'm not trying to ruin it. I'm just sharing my point of view.
the thing that I cannot unnotice, like. No, it's great. So anyway, here we are, part 2 of Sojourn. Jeffrey, why don't you go ahead and kick us off with the insight check?
So let's start this show by taking a look at this week's letter from Drizzt and roll an insight check. The insight check for this one is titled The Ranger, and it deals with guilt and the burden that it can be. Drizzt states that guilt resembles a sword with 2 edges. On one hand, it cuts for justice, imposing practical morality upon those who fear it. Guilt, the consequences of conscience, is what separates the goodly persons from the evil. And I think that's really interesting. Like in D&D, your alignment is kind of the backbone of your character's interactions. It's almost like a blueprint of how your character is going to respond in situations. Obviously, you ultimately control how your character will go, but your alignment gives you an ability to understand where it should spring forth from. Here, we see that Drizzt is explaining that guilt determines the difference between good and evil.
That's interesting. I like that.
I do. He says, given a situation that promises gain, most Drow can kill another, kin or otherwise, and walk away carrying no emotional burden at all. They may fear retribution, but they shed no tears for the victim. And we've seen that play out over and over again so far throughout the first two books. You know, in Menzo Berenzin, it was the Drow in the service of the Spider Queen.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but he explains that the goodly races, the suffering imposed by conscience will far outweigh any external threats. And we saw this with Belwar, for example. You know, how he interacted with Drizzt and how they how they both interacted with Clacker. So Drizzt felt compassion for what happened to Belwar. A little bit of guilt as well because the hands were removed.
Right, of course.
Belwar, he was riddled with guilt over his party, you know, them all dying. And they both felt for the hook horror that Clacker had become. And what I find really interesting here is he points out that guilt is always a self-imposed burden, but not always rightly imposed. And so, Justin, that made me thought, like, have you ever felt guilty over something that, you know, wasn't your fault? You know, maybe you, like, worn the shame of a situation that you shouldn't have. Like, you don't have to share anything too personal. I just wonder because you know, I know I definitely have.
I can't think of anything specific, but I'm sure I have. I'm like 100% sure. That,
I'm definitely put you on the spot. That's why I was like, you don't have to go too personal.
Right.
I know you weren't expecting me to throw a question at you as far as, hey, in your
no,
life,
fine.
have you ever felt
great.
shame?
No, that's great. No, I'm 100% sure that has happened because I feel guilty all the time. Usually from like something similar to Drizzt, right? Where was it really his fault that the Thistledowns were murdered? I mean, not entirely, right? Like if he never showed up, maybe they would have survived. Maybe. But I mean, they probably would have been killed by those gnolls, right?
Eventually, right? Something.
Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm at.
I know.
Like, I don't know. I'm sure I have.
I know, like, for me, when I was younger, I've had friendships and relationships that have ended. You know, for me, I internalized them.
Okay.
I took responsibility for all the shortcomings, and rarely do I place blame on the other people. You know, it's definitely something I've had to work with because carrying guilt can be traumatic. But I've always thought about it as, like, you know, you and your best friend fight, and suddenly you're not friends anymore. It's so easy for most people to be like, well, that guy's a jerk. But for me, I've always been like, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Maybe I was being a little bit too much this. Maybe it is my fault for this, that, and the other. And it's not to say that I'm only the I'm only the one
at fault.
Wow,
you're right.
Yeah, I'm messing that up.
No, you're good. Like you're
only the one to blame.
You're not the only one at fault. Like it's other people's responsibility as well. You know, like
right. And I know that, but say like for me, you can't change anybody else's stuff.
Right.
So I can only try to view what I've done wrong, and sometimes I take on too much of that baggage instead of just letting it sit where it should.
Right. I mean, pretty much not a day goes by where I don't think about, I could have handled that differently. I could have thought about that, instead of saying that, I shouldn't have said that. I should have said this instead. Like just about every day.
I think that's a neat way to look at like what he says about conscience defining the character, because you could sit there in those moments and be like, why did that person make me say that? Like I've been to anger management classes where a lot of the people in there will be like, well, my wife, she knows I've got a hair trigger. I don't know why she would say something like that. It's like, well, the fact that you're here talking about these things and I'm in the same room with you probably means you should phrase that differently.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, it's not her fault you have emotional problems. You need to work on it.
Right.
But some people are unable or unwilling at that point in time to be able to see it through that lens. So maybe that's the difference in character that Drizzt is ultimately getting at.
Okay.
Guilt and conscience can play that role, determining like that person will go along feeling vindicated. Of their anger because they think other people are pushing their buttons.
Right.
Whereas, I understand that I am the one ultimately responsible for allowing my anger to get out of control.
Yeah. That's a good point.
So, a little bit of therapy inside of the guilt session. But Drizzt ends by saying that in time, bolstered by the confidence of trusted friends, I came to throw off many of those burdens. Others remain and always shall. I accept this as inevitable and use the weight to guide my future steps. This, I believe, is the true purpose of conscience. And when I read this I thought about like marble statues that you see carved, and they have to be smoothed and sanded down to get the finer details of that. and the time spent rubbing them down to polish out those details is painstaking and burdensome. So it's almost like guilt is the cloth that we use to put the finishing touches on our character as we go through life, shaping the person that we become. And, it hit me pretty deep.
Yeah, totally. Huh. Awesome. Jeffrey, as always, you just hit a nat 20 on your insight checks.
Trying, buddy. Trying.
I feel like you do a lot better at those than I do. But, yeah, so awesome. With that, let's go ahead and take this, keep this ball rolling and take the show into the Drizzt. The Drizzt is the part of the show where we take a look at the next part of the book and we give you the Drizzt of it. How many chapters did we have here? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So 5 chapters.
I think 5. Yep.
So buckle up, guys. It's a ride. There's a lot happened within these 5 chapters. So chapter 6 is titled Sundabar, and it introduces a number of new characters. I had to actually read this chapter twice because of the new characters, and I'll talk about that in a second. But first we have Fret. They refer to him as a number of...
I took forever to understand that it's Fred, not
right.
Fret. Fred is what they're calling it.
They're calling it, right, exactly. And so Fredegar is a male dwarf sage with a yellow beard, from what I could gather, that seems to be at the receiving end of some teasing, some name-calling, right, from 2 other new characters. One, we have Dove Falconhand, a tall, white, bearded... No, that's not right. Not bearded, because female. I have female right after that. I mean, I guess if she was a dwarf, possibly, but she's a human, right?
She is.
Yeah. So a tall human ranger. I don't know where I got this white beard from. And then we also have Gabriel. I don't know.
Well, she has white hair.
Maybe it's the white hair.
So I don't know if you were thinking about the dwarf, Fred before that, and then maybe getting it mixed up.
And Jeffrey, I have a note later on. Coming up in just a second. So we have Dove and Gabe here, right? They're giving Fred a tough time, making fun of his name in a number of ways that really confused me. I'm just like, what is going on here? What are all these names? Because I have a tough time learning people by their names, okay? Which is probably one of the reasons why I'm not the biggest book reader. Just because a name doesn't do me anything. I need to see people's faces. I need to, I will get to know them later on. Like, now that I go back and it's like Dove and Gabe, I know these people because I learned more about what they did, and I have actions to attach to those names, right? It's a lot easier for me to read a book after I watched the movie, because it's like, Aragorn. Aragorn was Viggo Mortensen, and these are the things he did. And so I was able to read The Fellowship of the Ring almost 20 years after the movie came out. I couldn't do it before.
I can see that. For me, it's tough because I get generalities about faces. So I'll read and I'll have an idea of what they look like. Okay. But it's never as succinct as if I was casting a movie, I would want this person to play it.
Right.
But I do have the same thing what you're talking about. I will read a huge Stephen King fan. And then I'll watch a movie and be like, they cast Skarsgård as Pennywise. Okay. So when I first read it, I saw more of the Tim Allen or Tim Curry, because that was what it was in the miniseries.
Okay.
That's not what I had pictured in my head.
Right.
Because I expected this arachnid clown demon. So then they cast Skarsgård, and it's that. Now I won't be able to see anything else but that when I think of it in my head. You know what I mean?
Exactly. So, just if I get anything wrong, like I already did, make sure you call me on it.
Dove does not have a white beard, sir.
I don't know what happened there, but anyway. So yeah, when they're throwing around Fredegar, Fret, what was the one last name they threw at him? It was something like Quill Dipper or something like that. I was like, his last name is Quill Dipper. Wait, no, they're making fun of him because he's he's a sage, right? Yeah. And I was like, ugh. So it was just really confusing for me. But anyway, so all these new characters that we have just been introduced to, they have been given permission to see Helm Dorfriend, who is the master of Sundabar, sort of the king of Sundabar, right? Fred didn't think it proper that Dove show up all covered in dust from her journey, so he fetched her a silk gown, jeweled accessories, and some uncomfortable shoes. It was actually pretty funny, this whole scene. Dove knew that she was going to be miserable while wearing these articles, especially the shoes, right? But when looking at Fred's beaming face, she knew it would all be worth it, is how it was phrased. And again, just introduced to these characters, my first thought here is there a love connection here? Is she trying to please him in some way by dressing up like this? Or is this just a normal friendship and she's just trying to...
I think it's a little bit of love, but not like love is in romance. So I think it's one of the ideas you have where dwarves live for hundreds of years. So Fret has probably been in service to her family because she's coming from Silvery Moon, I believe, where her sister is like the high up, right?
Right.
So her whole life, Fred has been basically in charge of, making her look good, taking care of her, all the niceties, the social interactions that she would have needed to go to, probably for her mother as well. Okay. And he takes it very seriously. So he's the tailor, and he's probably got like 30 pins in his mouth, and he's like, "Look, stop moving, do this, do that." And I mean, she's a tomboy, right? So she's a rough and tumble, dirt on my pack, loves it.
Yeah.
And it's just frustrating him to no end. But she said in the one part where you said about calling him a quill dipper, how many times has she rode around singing a part of his song while she's on the road? They just stick in his head because he's a very talented person. So I think she loves him more like an uncle. Right. And she wants to see him, happy with what he does. And, she does understand they're giving him a tough time. And sometimes I think sees that it blurs the line between hurtful and playful. Right. And so she wants to, I think there's several moments where she kind of just leans into, let him have his moment, and I should probably just pull it back a little.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense, especially with the context of the rest of the chapter at this point.
Yeah.
Because this was like first impression. I was like, whoa, what's with that? What's with that look? But yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially knowing that, dwarves live a lot longer than humans do. And probably it's a generational thing, more like the old... like great uncle or something.
Yeah.
All right. So while this is going on, we have also a farmer riding from Maldabar to Sundabar. We need to remember that there was the whole dark elf ordeal back at the farm. The Drow went on a killing spree, killing the entire family that we thought was going to be around for the entire book. Oh, and of course, it wasn't an actual Drow, but rather it was Ulgulu or Ulgaloo or however we're pronouncing it. And he was just and he was shape changed into the guise of a Drow. But the farmers don't realize that. So now there's a farmer riding to Sundabar for aid because there has been a Drow sighting. Dove and Fret then made their way down the hallway to meet the master of Sundabar, but they were intercepted by yet another new character, which I don't think we met again, but the captain of the Night Watch, along with the farmer that just arrived. They went directly to Dove to inform her that there was a Drow sighting in Maldabar. Dove was more than excited to kick off those uncomfortable shoes and get out of having to talk to the master of Sundabar, but then she realized that she had very little experience with Drow. She's going to need a helper. So she decided to go see Helm anyway, and use this news to convince Helm to commission Fred to travel along with Dove. All right. They also got an elf archer, or I guess the elf archer and the two human fighters are already part of Dove's.
Yeah, I think
troop,
she's
right?
Like they're a traveling quartet of adventurers.
Yeah, but now they also have Fred coming along with. Yeah. So Dove joked that Fred should compose a song of their travels as they made their way to Maldabar. And yeah, first impressions here, I'm like, Sage, that is also a bard? Do we have a bard?
Yeah. I think you do.
I mean,
I do.
By definition, he's writing songs and everything. So,
like he does other things. Clearly, he's doing the liveries and stuff. The liveries, not deliveries.
Deliveries.
Like the livery being the the costume stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And he's got a knack for fashion. But I think it's a bard in the purest sense of a bard. Not like when people play a bard and you try to seduce everything that moves. I mean a bard that actually plays an instrument, puts on performance. It has a flair and a panache for the exceptional.
Yeah, I really do dislike that stereotype that all the bards have to be these people that are trying to seduce the dragon and everything. I'm just like,
I've played so one much too. More. You're right. It's a shoebox you don't need to put yourself into. Right. That's why I like you did the one shot where it's or Sarah was running the one shot of the Bard College, and we did a class of like how to be a bard without seducing creatures or something like that. I thought that was great.
That was hilarious. Our bard shots. We have to do some more of those. All right, and then that leads us into chapter 7, titled Simmering Rage. So as Dove and company made their way to Maldabar, Drizzt set out on his own journey, a quest of vengeance. It was the least he could do for the farmers and children that died just a couple nights ago. Drizzt called on Guinevere to track down Ogulu as he grabbed a broken plowshare, which is a rather heavy blade, but it's something that he could use as a weapon in a pinch, or, well, we'll see how he uses it. The rage that burned within the Drow made the weight of the plowshare pretty much not noticeable. Guinevere continued to track Ogulu, while Drizzt followed the familiar, yet faint, buzzing noise, Tyrannus the Quickling. Drizzt encountered the Quickling and strategically placed, threw down that, placed the plowshare along this tiny pathway, and, while the Quickling was watching Drizzt's scimitar, just ran smack into the plowshare, denting it. Those things they're thick.
I had to read this probably 4 times to understand the mechanics of how it worked.
Yeah.
And because at first he sets it down, but he kind of hides it.
Yep, exactly.
So I think he sets it down behind him. Tyrannus comes by, gets Drizzt, and Drizzt, he understands he can't keep up with that quickness.
Yep.
So he takes that as an acceptable wound. And then Guinevere, upside on the other, further up the path, he can hear the growl. She's faster, so she, at least has a chance to, I guess, cause a disturbance to Tyrannus, which then makes Tyrannus come back down. Now Drizzt pulls out the plowshare.
Yep.
And as Tyrannus is coming, he's like, nah, I gotta get him again. And then just
Wile E. Coyote style, just like runs right into this huge chunk of metal. Drizzt manages to quickly grab the Quickling while he's like stunned by the throat, right? He's like grabbing him by the throat, and he gathers some information pretty easily from him. He learns that Ogulu is the being that has killed the farmers, learns that his cave is just right up there. But then the Quickling starts to retaliate, grabs a dagger out of its boot, and starts just like slashing away like some like feral cat that you're trying to hold on to, and it's just like going at you, and
it's funny you say that, because when I originally pictured Tyrannus, I thought it was going to be like a Tinkerbell, tiny sprite, right?
Okay, yeah.
But we did the feature on Tyrannus last week, or the last episode, and they're like 2.5 feet tall.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it wasn't until I reread this a couple of times, the fight scene, that I realized that the Drow, Drizzt, is probably 4.5 feet tall.
Right. So it's like half his height. 5-ish.
Yeah, so he's not holding a tiny Quickling.
Right.
He's basically holding a large cat that can move at like subsonic speeds, and he's got it by the neck. And then when it gets to be too much, he's just like, you know what? Hoink, just yeets it right over the cliff.
Well, like slams him against the cliff to stun him, and then just just throws him right off the cliff. That was almost my dim light, because that was...
I'm not a huge fan of the word yeet, but in that context, it really does make me think about it. Yeah. Where he's like, wham, and then just yeets him off the cliff.
So I audibly gasped at that, because I was just like, oh no! There goes the Quickling. I'm like, oh, so I shouldn't say that I was disappointed at the fact that he might be dead, but I definitely wasn't like, I don't know. I feel like
Tyrannus such a soft spot for these bad creatures.
Eventually, we found out that Tyrannus didn't die. Right, he survived the fall by using a levitation spell. He cast it just in time to not get the full impact of the ground. Anyway.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say that I was disappointed that he lived, but it would have been pretty cool if that was it. But anyway, Drizzt went immediately to Ugulu's cave, and rather than gathering information first like he normally would, he waltzed right in, and the battle ensued. And
they even stated that Gwen was kind of shocked at his straightforward approach, or something.
Yeah, exactly. He just went right in. And I mean, so much happened in this battle, and I'm here trying to give you the Drizzt of it. I'm not trying to go through every single detail. We're gonna try to, so we'll see. I'm not gonna do it justice, but I mean, hey, if you're listening to this, you probably already read this chapter. So, Guinevere fought Ugulu, but when the Barghest shifted into a giant wolf form, then Gwen noticed that she was at a disadvantage, right? So she led Ugulu. That had
to be a massive wolf.
Well, I mean,
figured that the 400 to 500 pound Gwen was at a disadvantage.
I know, right? And so it's like, that thing must have been huge. So Gwen knew that she was going to have to use her mobility, her agility, and she needed to lead him out of the cave to really get the full effect of that. So she led Ugulu out of the cave while Drizzt battled Kemphana, Ugulu's sibling, brother, sister, I don't even know. Are they brothers? Anyway, they're both Barghests.
They're litter mates, right? Because they're whelps. So I guess they're like, when I hear whelp, I think like a kind of a dog, like a small child dog.
Okay, yeah.
And so I think that, I don't know if the term would be litter mate, but yeah, they're siblings of some sort.
Okay. So the battle with Kemphana was fierce, ending only when Drizzt's scimitar was shoved down Kemphana's throat. Like, how brutal was that? Like, twisting the scimitar.
Mid-change, too.
Yeah. Oh, I thought that...
Or am I wrong on that one?
I think Ugulu was mid-change.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Ugulu was mid-change, yeah. But Kemphana tried to, smother Drizzt before he died. And... yeah, Drizzt just kept twisting the knife until finally so gross. Drizzt then ran out of the cave to find Ugulu, attempting to push Guinevere over a cliff. And Drizzt just was like, okay, Guinevere, return! And throws the figurine out, calling her back. And normally in that situation, Gwen would just be like, no, I'm not, no. But she saw the strategy in it. She vaporized, and Ugulu went flying off of the cliff, because he had all that momentum being pushed in that direction already. So Drizzt then went down to the bottom of the canyon to dispatch Ugulu the rest of the way, who was then transforming. I think because I think he was trying to use the levitation spell, but he needed to transform back to his giant form in order to cast a spell. He couldn't cast a spell as a wolf. Drizzt ended up killing Ugulu, and then there was a roar coming from the cave, and it's like, oh man, I just killed these two giants, these two Barghests, now there's this other guy. And so,
ironically, actually a giant.
Yeah. So Lagerbottoms, the hill giant, was roaring up in the cave. Drizzt was too injured to continue fighting, so he fled the scene. This leads us into chapter 8, which is more than a day after the Thistledown massacre. The townsfolk went to investigate. They quickly found Drizzt's scimitar, and McGristle made his way into the scene and made his argument for chasing after the Drow while the trail was still fresh. Because, hey, that was the Drow's weapon that I saw him fight me with. It was obviously the Drow, right?
Yeah, and he's also still very invested for his ear and dog.
Oh, of course. Yeah, the dog, the scars on the face, the missing ear, it's all because of the Drow, so he wants that Drow dead. Delmo, the mayor of... Delmo, I forget what his last name is, but the mayor of Mandabar, offered McGristle, ultimately, in the end, 2,000 gold pieces. There was a little bit of bargaining going on there for the Drow's head. As long as Roddy waited for the ranger to arrive from Sundabar, that is. Back to Drizzt. He was still very injured after his fight with Kemphana and Ugulu. He was not... let's see. He was running from the hill giant, right? From Lagerbottoms. Yep. But with the beginning of daylight, Drizzt was at a severe disadvantage. or was going to be at a severe disadvantage because he would be easily seen. Drizzt was setting a snare trap, hopeful that he would catch the giant, and which he eventually did. And then he kind of had this moment where he was like, should I just leave it and take off? But then he's like, this giant's going to kill more families. So he went and killed the giant.
I found it very interesting, though, that they don't expressly tell you he goes to kill the giant.
That's true.
So he's like, at that, he says that he pulls his scimitar and goes forward, not caring the fact that his leg was caught in the snare, or whether or not it was caught in the snare. And it's like he walks in with some intention or something. It's like, huh. So I had to come back and reread that, and I was like, he doesn't actually tell you that he killed the giant.
Okay,
I wonder,
am I making assumptions here?
Is he going to come back in part 3, 4, 5, or later on? I don't know.
Maybe.
And, without saying anything about what coming down the line, just looking at it for what it is, they don't tell you that. And
that's
having,
true.
Watched Game of Thrones on HBO, when they don't expressly tell you,
they're not dead.
Sometimes they're not dead. But I do also think that this is where Lager Bottoms meets his demise.
I don't know. We might be making assumptions here. We'll see. But yeah, then Dove and her gang met with Delmo and McGristle at the Thistledown farm. And based on the evidence that they could see, Dove had some serious doubts that the culprits were Drow.
You've got some tricky words that come through here, like Delmo, Mayor of Mandabar, McGristle and Thistledown. Like you just throw it out. You're doing.
It's not that bad, is it?
Where are you going to find something that rhymes with McGristle that close to it? Like, wow.
McGristle, yeah, anyway, I didn't even think about that.
Right? I was just realizing, like, when we did Sandabar and Mandabar, Delmo, Mayor of Mandabar, like, there's a whole lot of words that you're throwing out there that really could trip up pretty easy, but you've done great.
Oh, thank you. So, yeah, like I was saying, Dove has some serious doubts that the culprits were Drow, because, one, the slash across McGristle's face was not clean enough. Okay, like that was not done by a scimitar, Drow scimitar. Something powerful would have needed to break through the door of the barn, or was that the house? I forget. There was a big door that was smashed in, and she's like, no, a Drow wouldn't do that. There was also a younger woman that was clearly not killed by Drow because she was like half eaten.
Consumed, yeah.
Yeah, and it's not how a cat would eat either, like a large panther, and so it's just like, this was not a Drow, this was not a panther. And
good old Roddy McGristle there, he's like, the beast cat, the hell cat, that's what it must have been.
Yeah.
Like, I've never seen a panther half eat somebody, Roddy.
Right. The troop camped out at the Thistledown farm that night, preparing to set out at morning's first light. That night, Drizzt looked at the lights of Maldabar. Is it Maldabar or Mandabar?
I have Mandela'd myself into not knowing, sir.
Maldabar, right?
I think it's
Sundabar. Sundabar and Maldabar. I don't know. Whatever their village is, whatever their town is. But anyway, he was looking at the lights for the last time, it said. Quote, for the last time. And I'm like,
Maldabar, you're right.
Maldabar, okay. I'm pretty sure I say Mandobar somewhere.
I think you said that earlier because it was Delmo from Yeah.
Yeah, because I have Mandalorian on the brain. I don't know.
I take back telling you that you didn't trip up over any of those words.
You can't. It's recorded. We got it. I'm going to edit that part out.
Got me again.
But yeah, I was interested in like, okay, is it really going to be his last? I mean, if it's Salvatore saying that it's his last time, it's his last time looking at the lights of Maldabar.
I mean, he's going to know better than we do.
Right. And so where's he going? Chapter 9 is then titled The Chase. The group from Sundabar were now investigating the trail of the Drow. They encountered Ulgulu's corpse, then Kempfana, then the two goblins. It doesn't say anything about ever finding Lager Bottoms, though, from what I remember.
Yep. Nope. I tried to check that, too. Like, they see the tracks, but they don't be like, oh, and there's the body of the giant.
Right. I don't remember them ever talking about it, so, yeah, I don't know. Fred was quick to identify Kempfana as a Barghest, and at that point, the light bulbs start going off, right? As soon as he identified the creature's life cycles and identified what this Barghest is, then the troop realized that the lady in the barn that was half-eaten must have been half-eaten by the Barghest, right? McGristle was too stubborn. He was still convinced that the Drow killed the Thistledowns. I don't know if it's just like blind stubbornness or if he realizes it but still wants the Drow dead. Like he's just like choosing that stance, or if he's actually convinced himself, you know what I mean? Like I know later on he understands like, okay, it probably wasn't the Drow, but at least that's
I think he's blinded by his want of vengeance, and
right.
He's also the kind of person that strikes me up until this point who isn't wrong much. You know, he lives up by himself. Right. He hunts bad guys. He's a tough guy. Those villagers are just silly and blah blah blah. So how dare anybody else come in here and tell me I might be wrong?
Yeah. Reasoning through the rest of the clues, Dove and her companions were basically able to see the true story that happened on the day of the battle between Drizzt and the Barghests. It was actually very impressive. McGristle, however, wanted that Drow dead. He wanted his 2,000 gold pieces more so, because that was like, what, I think 1,000 gold pieces he said was like 5 times more than his normal bounty, and now he's just like 2,000, and so it's like it's a lot more than he would normally get.
And he's got help to go get it too. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. That night, Drizzt saw the light of a campfire near the Barghest's lair. He sent Guinevere to investigate. The troop recognized when the panther was stalking them from a tree. But before they had a chance to trap Gwen, McGristle's dog was bumped free. There was some kind of a tussle, some kind of a physical, like people running into each other, that released the dog. The dog started barking wildly, warning Gwen that she was found. And then Calendil, the elven archer, took a shot at Gwen on McGristle's command. Calendil was furious at Roddy for commanding a shot at an innocent creature. Gwen left the scene with blood trailing behind, which is ultimately going to lead them to Drizzt. So once Gwen got back, Drizzt sent Gwen back to her realm to heal, and Drizzt knew he had to move on because they were going to be following that blood trail. And then, of course, his trail.
That part for me was really cool because you see the difference between a bounty hunter and a ranger.
Oh yeah, you know
what I mean? Like,
totally.
They both go and can get the bad guy, but
right.
A ranger is like a surgeon, whereas like
right.
The bounty hunter is just a crude butcher. Like the surgeon goes in and can slice tendons and put together and knows the workings, and the butcher's just hacking at ball joints in the shoulder and stuff.
That's a great analogy. No, totally. That totally makes sense. So yeah, Drizzt ended up leaving as quickly as he could, and then that leads us into Chapter 10, the question of honor. Dove and her companions are now tracking Drizzt through the wilds surrounding Maldabar. Drizzt led them through a series of dense trees and narrow mountain passages, but the group quickly picked up on Drizzt's attempts to lose the trackers. Drizzt's trail led them toward a river, a great place to break off his scent. Drizzt continued to leave a messy trail for his pursuers to follow, but Drizzt still couldn't help to look behind him curiously, almost hopefully, to see if his trackers had caught up. Because, I mean, he's known loneliness for too long. He's too familiar with loneliness after, 10 years in the Underdark by himself. But he was also lonely, like, while living in Menzoberranzan, you know? So he's way too familiar of loneliness and is definitely longing for companionship. As with the deep gnomes of Blingdenstone, Drizzt couldn't help it. He had to go observe his pursuers. So when he saw one was an elf, Drizzt revealed himself. And I was like, finally, like, they're going to, like, get along, right? That's what I'm thinking is going to happen. Especially once Calendil, the elf, could speak Drow. It was just like, oh, perfect. This is all going to go so well. But Calendil wasn't interested in what Drizzt had to say, and he ran in to attack him. Drizzt dropped a globe of darkness and fled, leaving a bit of doubt. This quote, a bit of doubt in the kindly elf's not so closed mind. And I had to think about that for a long time. I had to reread that and just contemplate just what kind of doubt exactly. What
well,
doubt?
they saw the clues, right? So they know how everything played out at the Thistledown farm.
Okay.
Then he saw that this drow went and got revenge by killing Ogaloo and his friends. And then, being confronted, he still charges in to fight, but instead of fighting, Drizzt runs.
So what is he doubting?
I think he's doubting his conviction that this drow and all drow are evil at that point. That that this drow is just like the other drow.
Yeah, it didn't say that specifically, but that's exactly what I was thinking as well. Not doubting that what they have found so far is incorrect. It's reinforcing that, right? Reinforcing those clues that they've seen. No, that's exactly what I was thinking. The Sundabar troop and Roddy. Sounds like a traveling band. The Sundabar troop and Roddy. They were now
Roddy McGristle and the Sundabar troop.
Nice. They're now in hot pursuit of Drizzt because he showed himself. They knew he was close. And as they were ascending a steep slope, they encountered what seemed to be an avalanche. Stone after stone coming rolling down the mountain, but it was no avalanche. Stone giants, and possibly the bowling type. As the battle raged below, Drizzt couldn't help. There was part of Drizzt that wanted to just be like, leave him. Like, whatever, you know?
Like, at least I got away.
But he couldn't help but compare this moment to the gnolls and the farmers. So Drizzt he summoned Guinevere and he turned around. He rushed in to his tracker's aid. Drizzt and Gwen quickly made their way to a steep slope above some giants and started an avalanche. Like, how ballsy is that? Like, that's awesome
too, right? Like, you're gonna roll down rocks at the people rolling rocks at the people. Innovative.
So he started this avalanche and then used a levitation spell to basically hover above the rocks, but it was wavering, and that spell specifically has failed him 2 other times, and so it's like this is a really crazy move.
I like how it points out that he thought about these things after the fact. He didn't consider any of them beforehand.
Right. So Drizzt had to find a quick escape after he realized his levitation spell was wavering. He dropped the levitation spell and made for a ridge, only to fall short of his target. The avalanche was surely about to kill him, and it would have if Guinevere... and I didn't totally understand exactly what happened here. It sounded like Guinevere got in the way of the rocks and took on the brunt force of that avalanche.
I guess it was a bit more, but in my dim light, we can revisit.
Oh, okay. That. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So Dove and Calendil saw the avalanche, saw the drow, saw Drizzt, caused it, and saw him levitating along it before all that happened. And
which to them had to look like he was trying to run down the cascading boulders. You know what I mean? Like, you look up and see this small, diminutive creature running on top of the boulders, basically, because he wasn't above them by much.
Right. That would be quite the sight. And so with that sight, they seemed to recognize that the drow was trying to save them, and they realized that they had a chance to make a break from their position while those rock giants were buried under an avalanche. So that's what they did. They made a break for it. And as they ran, Roddy and his dog ran face to face into a 20-foot stone giant. And using his axe named Bleeder, Roddy chopped the giant down like a tree. And this got me thinking, do stone giants bleed? And then I realized, when they're called stone giants, I don't think that means they're actually made of stone. I think I'm thinking like a rock elemental.
Okay.
In like Tolkien's version of a stone giant is a giant that is literally made of stone.
Right.
And so that's what I was envisioning here. But then I had to page through my book, my monster manual. I was like, no, No, they're not made of stones. Or
No,
like
they get
rocks in
advantage
general.
in
Like,
stones.
they're just like giants that like to use stones as weapons. It took me way too long to get that image of beings that are made of stone out of my mind. Because I'm like, how are they shooting them with arrows and it's hurting? That doesn't make any sense. But yeah, then it was like, oh, they're not actually stone. The Sundabar troop dispatched a group of stone giants, and the others attempted to flee. The other stone giants. McGristle and his dog went chasing after them. Drizzt, injured from so many fights in this part of the book, used a stick as support to stand up from his prone position, but realized that the elf, Calendil, was right behind him. They made eye contact, and Dove came into the scene, and Dove said, "That one was never our enemy. Let him go." And they turned and they left Drizzt. Calendil dropped a healing potion and the Quickling's dagger from his belt. These were meant for Drizzt. And then they left. The Sundabar troop and Roddy made their way back to Maldabar, convinced that the Barghest were the true killers of the Thistledown family, and also convinced that the mayor's bounty for the Drow wouldn't hold up once he found out that who the true killers were. Drizzt took the healing potion and woke up in the middle of the night amazed at its healing properties, which I didn't realize it was a healing potion at first, but yeah, like it clicked at the same time when he said it. It was like, oh, it's a healing. Oh, okay. Like that was a pretty cool way to describe it.
It is literally a token of friendship. I was like, oh, that is so cool.
Yeah.
I liked it a lot.
Yeah,
I think you did a great job with all that.
Thanks. All right. Well,
it's funny to me to think about when you realize, Roddy just chases off after a 20-foot giant. Like, me and my dog gonna go get me some. Wow.
I mean, if you had a feral cat chasing after you, I would run. Well,
no, that's Roddy and the dog that went after him. You were saying
right.
There.
But I mean, like, the giant is 20 feet tall, and here you have, I mean, I know Roddy's a big guy, but he's not 10 feet.
No, he's probably like a 6.5.
That's
right?
what I mean.
Big,
but it's like
burly.
Yeah. But I don't know. Under the right circumstances, yeah, I would run from something that is that small. I mean, if it was like an animated doll that was like Chucky or something coming out, yeah, I'd run. All right, so that is the Drizzt. Let's go ahead and continue this party in the dim light reel.
The dim light reel is where we cast darkness on our favorite parts from this week and dim light all of our favorite characters, events, descriptions, and more. So for me, we're going to go right back to the end of chapter 10 here.
Nice.
It's Drizzt saves the day. Like, the first thing is to remember that before we get into this fight, Drizzt has fought Tifanis and received a few cuts to his wrist.
Yep.
He's killed Camphana, which cost him a couple of cracked ribs.
Oh, that's right.
Then he fought Lagerbottoms, the hill giant.
Well, he did have to kill Ulgalu in there, too, but I don't think that was much of his own battle,
Right. Yeah. That's why I figured Guinevere had most of the physical contact there. Then he fights the hill giant, but there is no rest to be had for our favorite Drow, as he sees the band of adventurers that has been following his trail doggedly, despite his best attempts to shake him off. One of those attempts took him to the path, the adventurers into the path of a group of stone giants, and Drizzt saw the fight break out. And true to his nature, he just could not leave them there to die. He felt some responsibility for the fight that was unfolding before him as the giants split into two groups that would quickly move to flank and kill those who were following Drizzt.
Yeah, and he didn't want to live with that guilt piled up on top of on top of the guilt that he already had from the Thistledowns.
Now, Drizzt watched the giants split up from his spot on top of the ridge, and he realized that one group was moving out of range. So then he decided to make his move on the ones that were going to be the most dangerous. He moved quickly, but noticed the terrain in front of the giants was treacherous. So he grabbed Guinevere, and then they moved above the band, where the loose landscape was on the verge of collapse. Drizzt moved to push the boulder and start the rock slide, but his slight frame really didn't do much to nudge it. And Guinevere, however, her tactics were less subtle. And the panther charged down the mountainside, dislodging stones and leaping onto the rocks to send them bouncing down towards the giants.
That was a
And all
really
I could
cool
think
visual.
I was gonna say the visual was like there's Drizzt like, and he's putting his back into it, and just throwing a push into it, and then Gwen just comes bounding down the hill, right? And just like, you know, with a big old panther smile
just
on
like,
her
oh,
face.
I know, I get it.
Right? I get to frolic and play. Boom, 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 boom. And so then Drizzt, he just jumps along with the rock slide and contributes whatever he can to enhance the avalanche moving down. And it seemed that the very ground beneath his feet seemed to be coming down. And Drizzt suddenly knew he was in trouble, as he was not as quick and agile as Guinevere, who had blown past the giants. He leapt high into the air and called upon a levitation spell as he went. He fought hard to hold his concentration on the effort, for the spell had failed him twice before, and if he faltered now, he would surely die.
Yeah.
Despite his determination, he could feel himself becoming heavy on the air. He tried to flail his arms, but he was coming down. And I just think that was a very cartoonish visual.
Oh, yeah, totally.
But if you've ever fallen, I mean, you really, unless you've done it a bunch and, you know, trained yourself for it, them arms flailing.
Well, again, that's
what's going to happen.
It's very much a Wile E. Coyote visual where it's like he looks down and he starts to fall and he's like flapping his arms to try to
I even hear like the noise in my head when I see it. You know, like. So he found himself half floating, half dancing atop the rock slide. One giant stumbled out of the way, only to get pounced upon by Guinevere and go down in a heap. Drizzt struggled to stay above the fray of the falling rocks, but the dust began to choke and sting his eyes. He spotted a ridge that may provide safety and let go of the spell. Scrambling quickly, he hit the ground running, and then a rock clipped his knee and he found himself parallel to the ground, sliding, rolling, doing whatever he could to help throw his momentum over that ridge, but he fell far short. Then he tried to gain his feet and dive, but his injured leg buckled and he was left exposed. A large impact on his back signaled his impending doom.
But
Dazed.
Sorry, I was just going to say, but there's like 30-some more books, so he can't be dead.
Dazed, he looked around to find out that he had somehow made the ridge that he was so short of. Only then did he realize the weight upon him was Guinevere, laying on top of its master, shielding him until the last of the rocks rolled to a stop. And that's where I was saying there was a little bit more because he fell short. So he was just going to get crushed and overcome by these rocks. He was waiting for the weight of that avalanche. So Gwen must have come down and either knocked him over the ridge or picked him up, set him over the ridge, and then shielded him as the rocks, you know, were meeting the last of their slide there.
Gotcha. Okay.
So not only did she take the brunt of that force, but she made sure that he got to where he needed to be safe, and then laid on top of him. I thought that
makes sense. Okay.
Such a beautiful moment.
Totally.
As the chaos came to an end, Drizzt noticed that the one giant had made its way safely away from the group that he had attacked. Drizzt set Guinevere in quick pursuit. Then he found a stick to use as a cane and managed to get back to his feet. Now, I wanted to choose this as my dim light because I feel like it really highlights the moral character that Drizzt possesses. You know, despite being in so many brutal encounters prior to this one, I don't think we've ever seen him take this kind of damage leading up to a fight. He still forged ahead with little to no regard for his own safety. Now, he wasn't helping friends, he wasn't helping loved ones, or anyone that he actually even knew. These were people who were actually chasing him through the mountains. And, I mean, if you think about it, the last thing that tracked his trail was Lager Bottoms, and despite mumbling out that he wanted to be friends, it hadn't really gone well for Drizzt. You know? They weren't going to be pals and companions. But Drizzt still puts himself in harm's way to try to save him.
Yeah. Totally. So, I will say that for me, you're cutting in and out. I assume you're recording on your side, so
yeah,
you should be getting all of your
I hope
audio.
So, yeah.
So I'm not quite catching everything. I'm reading your thing here. So anyway, yeah, a crazy scene. Definitely a lot going on, so it was hard for me to interpret exactly everything that's going on, especially with that whole Guinevere thing. But yeah, I think that makes sense that Guinevere would have like either pulled him up to that safe position and then like laid on top of him, or laid on top of him just enough and like kind of like deflected the boulders as they came by, or as the last of them went past, or something like that. but did Guinevere do anything else after that?
She went after the giant.
She did go after the giant.
Yeah, because he sees the one leaving, and he's like, go get him.
Yeah,
And
so
then he gets up.
Yeah, so she wasn't injured enough to not battle at that point, but
which is something because she took all the, she took that arrow, and then
right.
Also, that already killed one giant. Like, she's got a pain threshold.
Right. Man, all of these people do.
Yeah, meanwhile, I stub a toe and I'm out for 3 days.
I know, right? Like, I slept wrong and my lower back is killing me. I'm just like...
I don't laugh because it's funny. I laugh because it's true, right. And I understand.
No, I laugh about it too because I'm just like, man, that was dumb. That's so dumb. I would make the worst hero ever.
I have a nice mattress and I still managed to hurt myself.
I know, right?
Sleeping.
I don't know how much money we spent on those foam mattresses, and still my back is. Ugh. Anyway, my dim light for this week, I really wanted to highlight Dove, Falcon Hand, as a character for my dim light. But what I figured out was, I think what I liked most about Dove was the fact that she had a lot of head-to-head moments with Roddy. And so that's kind of my dim light for this week. So a combination of Dove Falcon Hand, the ranger from Sundabar, clearly renowned for her skill as a tracker and bounty hunter, as well as Roddy McGristle, this bounty hunting mountain man that is very stubborn in his ways of finding his bounty.
I love that. I love that.
So yeah, you do get a sense very quickly that Dove has a lot of renown, right? As soon as Delmo is just like, remember the mayor of Maldabar, as soon as he makes a point to require Roddy to wait for the ranger, it's like, oh, who is this?
Now,
like,
do you think that she's just the ranger or a ranger? Like, you know what I mean? Like, when he says wait for a ranger, do you think that Delmo knows it's going to be Dove Falcon Hand? Or that, like, the guild of rangers, one of the rangers that will be sent, are just of such high renown?
Oh, well, it could be that too. I interpreted it as the ranger, like she is the ranger, but it would make it would make sense that there's a lot of other rangers out there. So obviously, as you were saying, Roddy is not a ranger. He is a butcher.
He never took the ranger test.
He's too good for that. So yeah, I interpreted it as she was the ranger they were waiting for, but I could totally see like a ranger, absolutely. So I loved the dynamic between Roddy and Dove. There were so many moments where there was this back and forth, this stubborn Roddy versus this well thought out Dove who kept a level head and open mind as she took in all the data of her surroundings. So though there was no evidence that would sway McGristle any other way, though there was no evidence that would sway McGristle any other way. He was just this real stubborn guy. But Roddy was Maldabar's representative in the hunting party, and Dove needed to respect Roddy's opinion because of that, at least to a certain extent. So there were a number of moments throughout the chapter where he would say something and they're just kind of like, they wanted to just ignore it. They wanted to blow it off. They wanted to just like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's obviously not seeing the same evidence that we're seeing.
Brett legitimately didn't even care. He was just like,
yeah.
Wait, hold on. You're so wrong.
Yeah. But at a certain point, a couple times they're just, what was it? I forget what the decision was, but I remember at one point Dove is just like, you know what? Like, fine. We'll listen to you because I don't want any more arguments.
It's a testament to her tact.
Yeah.
Understanding how to go about the situation. And when you think about it, really, maybe it's an extension of how she could see like how the scenes played out by looking at the tracks of the fight. Right. You know, same idea, like looking at this social interaction that's going on, she can understand that if they push on McGristle too hard, he'll just become a problem that they don't need. You know what I mean?
Right, exactly. Totally.
I thought it was really cool.
So Dove is so skilled in her profession that she, like I was saying multiple times, she quickly saw evidence at the Thistledowns farm that the killer or killers could not possibly be Drow. Again, the girl in the barn was half eaten. That's not Drow-like. A door was smashed through that would require the force of, more than just a Drow or two.
Yeah, that beam in the kitchen that was smashed when he smacked the head. Yeah.
Yeah, when Bart got his head smashed in up there. Yep. Even the depths of the killer's tracks hinted at a killer that was much heavier than a Drow.
That, to me, really jumped out because when Ulgulu decided that he was going to be a Drow, when you see something, you're like, my eyes told me what I saw. My eyes don't lie.
Yeah.
Right? But we went through the illusion magic before, and like if you were to touch the illusion, it's really going to be Ulgulu, despite what you see. So those tracks are Ugulu's weight, not the Drow, who only weighs like 50 pounds.
Exactly.
So it's like, if those people would have just stopped to look at the tracks, they would have known there was more to meet the eye.
They should have.
But it takes somebody with Dove's expertise to be like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really cool.
Yeah, so she pretty much knew right away that any Drow were innocent of these killings. McGristle didn't care for any of that evidence, except for the fact that the Drow's scimitar was found at the farm. The fact that the Drow's scimitar was there, that was all he needed. He latched onto that. He was taking that one to the grave. He's just like, the Drow did it. His sword was there. We don't need any other evidence.
Drow. Drow sword.
It's easy. Anyone that doesn't get this is dumb. Let's see. Later on, after the Barghest corpses were discovered, Dove was so cunning that she was basically able to put together all of the other details from part 1 of the book. She pieced together all of it.
Yeah.
Reading through all of the evidence Dove was finding, and her hypotheses, her reasonings, reading about her thought processes, it was just so satisfying to read all that, mainly because I feel like as a reader, I wanted them to figure out the truth, right? I wanted them to realize that Drizzt was innocent. And it was just such a great feeling when they saw the half-eaten lady in the barn. Not for the fact that it was a half-eaten lady, but McGristle says, it was the panther, it was the hellcat or whatever. And then Dove was like, cats don't eat like that. Oh, wait. It must have been from this corpse over here, the Barghest. Like, that thing would do that.
Right.
So I just loved moments like that where McGristle was just so, like, stubborn in his ways. Just like, this is how it is. And Dove's just like, do you see this over here? Like, it's obvious, like, this is how it actually is. So it was great seeing Dove making the right call all over the place. It was also awesome seeing McGristle being wrong a bunch of times. I think my favorite example of this was when they tracked Drizzt to a cliff and then assumed that the Drow leapt off and used a levitation spell to land safely at the bottom. And as stubborn as McGristle was, he implored that they make the trek down the cliff before bed, like another 2 hours or so to get down there. And then who knows how long they were looking for tracks or the trail at the bottom, but there was no sign of it. Drizzt set it all up, and McGristle fell for it. I loved that.
Yeah. He just bludgeonedly just right through the track. Like, yeah, this is where we got to go. I need the trail to still be hot for my dogs. And,
yeah.
Like, where's the trail, McGristle?
I was like, guess we got to go back up. So that's my dim light. I do have to say at this point, I am lost. I am a little lost at this point in the book because I was so convinced that Ugulu was the big bad of the book. Yep. And
when we did the episode 0, I was pretty sure there was going to be it's Ugulu, right? Or the Barghest, or what? Maybe the Stone Giant, or the Lagabottoms, the Hill.
They're all dead, Jeffrey.
Yep. We didn't even hit the middle of the book yet.
And so I'm like, yeah, we're not even halfway through. And so I'm like, who's next in line? And I know that Tephanis is still alive, but Tephanis is more like a little henchman, a minion, right? Yeah. He needs someone to be his leader. And I'm wondering if McGristle is going to
Okay.
be the big bad. That's kind of where my mind is going, because McGristle still wants Drizzt dead,
Definitely.
you know? And so that's kind of my prediction at this point in the book, but I don't know.
Even though, really, again, if you take a look further back, it's not Drizzt's fault the dog died. If they would have just like not been so gung ho on blaming the Drow and chasing after the Drow and putting the Drow in a bad position, they'd be fine.
Yep. Yep.
It's like you said earlier about like, had you not done it, would those things still have happened, right?
Right.
Like, we know very well that that would not have happened because the
Right.
Drizzt wasn't attacking anybody in that town.
Right. Totally. All right.
Excellent.
So that's the dim lights for this week. Let's go ahead and jump into the dungeon delve.
The Dungeon Delve is the part of the show where we link this week's reading with our tabletop role-playing game favorite, D&D 5e. So, for me, my Dungeon Delve, I wanted to look into the hill giant that we met, Lagerbottoms.
Lagerbottoms. That's a fun
And
name.
if you, right? I just had to work that in whenever I can. If you head over to our Drizzt Cord, you'll see the stats that I'm going to be talking about in our creature feature link. I already have them in here this time, so no
Nice.
need to wait for me to go back and actually update them. So it says that hill giants are voracious, primitive giants that are defined by their gluttony. And when it comes to true giants, they're the shortest in stature, weakest in mind, and lowest in rank, according to the Ordning. So you have cloud giants, mountain giants, Etten, which are commonly called two-headed giants.
Oh, okay.
You- I had to go through all these because I was
Yeah,
totally
yeah.
curious. So they have fire giants, fog giants, hill giants,
There we are.
titans, storm giants, stone giants, and Fairland giants. They're a breed of giants descended from the stone giants that are found in the Underdark.
Ooh.
And then the ordning that I mentioned earlier is actually the social structure that all giants adhere to. So the giants actually know based on their it's almost like it's like a caste system based on what they are, what giants would be inferior or superior to them, and the giant pantheon
Interesting.
like status. Hill giants normally stand between 15 to 17 feet tall, and they weigh around 4,500 pounds. But
Good.
being those gluttonous monsters that they are, they can sometimes go over 5 tons.
Ay, ay, ay.
Well over, it says. Like, oh goodness. So I thought it was neat that Forgotten Realms Wiki mentions that they're that their idea of beauty is the opposite of most races. Straight teeth, neat hair, unblemished skin, clear speech, and a lack of drool when eating were abnormal, if not repulsive, traits.
That's funny.
So their personality is selfish and brutish bullies. They're uncivilized savages that survive by foraging, hunting, and raiding for food when they're not coercing smaller beings into doing their work and feeding them. Most hill giants are chaotic evil, about 50%, but true neutral or even chaotic good hill giants are not unheard of.
Interesting.
Hill giants are reckless, sluggish, and notoriously moronic. That made me chuckle.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
they state that they would have died out long ago if their great size and formidable power did not compensate for their dull wits and lazy disposition.
That makes sense.
The way it actually explains it is like hill giants are so stupid, or giants in general are not as, brilliant because they've never had to overcome hardships. They're just so much bigger than other things. So rarely in their lifespan are they ever actually challenged.
Huh. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I was like, wow, they thought about it from a genetic standpoint of
Right.
evolution.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So hill giants' preferred mode of combat is to charge in and bash. They have a speed of 40 feet and a reach of 10 feet. But if the enemy is outside of that range, then the hill giants will gladly grab a rock and throw it, even though they're at a disadvantage. Remember, they're ferocious but lazy.
Yep.
So when I say disadvantage, I mean from a D&D standpoint, they would be throwing that rock at disadvantage.
Right.
So this had me confused a little bit at first because I was wondering how Lagerbottoms differed from the stone giants who were throwing rocks at the adventurers, right? So it turns out that stone giants love throwing rocks. They make an art out of it. So when you said bowling, it made me chuckle because I was like, technically, they would be sitting back there like, hey, watch this. I can curve it around the tree down there. Stone giants are much more introverted and less belligerent than other kinds of giants. And they really aim to simply drive trespassers off rather than to tangle with them. So the hill giant will charge in and bash, but the stone giant won't actually move in closer. They'll normally just sit back and throw stones to deter anybody from coming in. Like, so for them, if they're at a disadvantage, they think that a shot across the bow is just as good as a shot into the target because they just want people to stay away.
Right. Huh.
So they also have stone camouflage, which actually allows them to hide among their rocky terrain even better. Also, gotcha. Stone giants, they can knock their targets prone, where normal giants just get damage for hitting with rocks. That's another mechanic part of the D&D, right. Where not only when, if you're getting attacked by a hill giant, you're going to take damage because the hill giant hits you. But if it's a stone giant, you can take damage from being hit and also be knocked prone, okay. Which could lead to a lot of problems for your character.
Right. You're not moving as fast then.
So let's get down to the details of the stat block. Back to the hill giant. They have an armor class of 13. Their hit points average 105, but you would roll 10d12 and add 40. So you could max out a hill giant at 160. Their speed, as I mentioned earlier, is 40 feet. They're going to receive a +5 to strength, -1 to dex, +4 to constitution, -3 to intelligence, -1 to wisdom, and a -2 to charisma. For skills, they're going to get a +2 to perception. Their passive perception will be a 12. So you think about it, their lack of intelligence. Well, 10 is that main medium. So if they didn't have any negafires, they'd be.
That means they have a +2, yeah.
Yeah, but that's, I guess, the skill because they're hill giants who spend their time out on the hill.
I guess so, yeah.
But it's funny because their lack of intelligence definitely doesn't help them notice their surroundings.
Right.
So they speak giant, and they have a challenge rating of 5. For actions, this is where it gets fun. They have a multi-attack action where they can make 2 great club attacks. Oof. Now, the great club, it gets a it gets a +8 to hit, and it has a reach of 10 feet. Okay. So on a 20-sided die, most people, early adventurers, are going to have anywhere between like a 13 to 16 on their AC. That means that they already got about half your AC added to what they roll. So they're brutish. You don't want to get too close to them.
Yeah.
If they hit you, you're going to be looking at they deal 3d8 +5 bludgeoning damage. So on one roll, if they maxed it out, you're looking at 29 damage. If they crit roll you, you're in trouble.
That's killing an entire party of level 1 wizards in one swing.
And they get 2 swings. So with 2 swings, that could be devastating. Totally. Now, the ranged attack... Hey, Tahani. The ranged attack would be a rock. It's got a +8 to hit as well. And the reach is 60 to 240 feet. And it deals a 3d10 +5 bludgeoning damage. So a little bit more damage, but only 1 rock attack at a time. So when you look at how they're put together, with a low armor class, they aren't going to be that hard to hit. But you got to get close enough to hit them. And if you're going to get close enough, you're going to have to deal with their huge advantage to hit, as well as their advantage to range, because your melee attack is going to be 5 feet. They get to attack you before that.
Yep.
That range is going to be problematic with their health. They look a little tanky, so it's probably not going to be a quick battle either, unless you got something in your arsenal that's going to deal massive damage. So most likely, I mean, what you'd want to do as an early level adventuring party is hopefully you guys have some magic you can cast from a distance or some ranged attacks. But at that point, too, you're going to want partial coverage or something, because that giant will be hurling rocks at you with a decent chance to hit you.
Yeah. I think I had you guys fight a giant before, but this is going back a few campaigns. Remember when you were the turtle?
Oh, yeah.
Tazlu, I think it was his
Tazlu,
name?
my grappling turtle monk.
Yeah. And you guys went into a dungeon room that had like wolves and a hill giant. And you were like, how did the giant get in this room? Because it was like a small door. And I was like, I don't know. It's there, though. And yeah, you just like grappled and like just destroyed that whole encounter with your grapple and blocking the door and man.
Early on, grappling is fun to play for those of you who are looking for a challenge.
All right, for my dungeon delve, I wanted to keep on the theme with having Dove from my dim light. My dungeon delve is on the Ranger class. And I wanted to choose the Ranger class because I know it gets a lot of hate, at least the 5e version. And so for that reason, I never played one. So I wanted to look into it here. I never played a Ranger. No, I know Dad was a Ranger in one of our campaigns, so I got to see one get played a couple times. But yeah, I never actually played one. I don't know that I ever actually built one. And so this dungeon delve also served the purpose of familiarizing myself a little bit with the class. And so by the end, I have a little bit of what I think about the class. So in 5e, Rangers are described as deadly hunters, warriors of the wilderness that specialize in hunting monsters.
Ryan was a ranger.
No.
Right? Because he would put that arrow thing on it. That was our first...
No. He was a paladin in our first campaign. Dad was the ranger. Dad was the dark elf, chaotic evil ranger, and it was a nightmare.
So I feel like Sarah would use Ryan had something where he would move the target though, right? Like where he shot and it would do a ton of damage, but he would move his target from person to person. I can't remember which character that was.
Maybe he was a ranger.
Maybe that was when I was playing the Turtle Monk.
It might have been. I don't remember.
Yeah, Dad was definitely a ranger when he tried to TPK the people.
Yeah.
Normally, you've got to worry about the DM trying to TPK.
Right? No, he tried to do it, and it's like, what are you doing? So in 5e, like I said, deadly hunters, warriors of the wilderness, they tend to specialize against specific foes. So it might make sense for you to talk to your DM when making a ranger, because you don't want to show up to an undead party with a gnoll hunting ranger. It would not end well.
Right. Be like, could you please send the farmer for the other ranger? I didn't mean the ranger.
Rangers can be found on page 89 of the player's handbook. So if you want to follow along on there, I'm not going to go through the specific stats, but I'll just kind of go through a general idea of everything here. The book suggests that your highest ability score go to your dexterity and the second to your wisdom, which makes a lot of sense. A ranger should be agile as they traverse the wilderness, but they also need a high perception, and your perception comes from your wisdom modifier. So at level 1, they receive the ability Favored Enemy, which allows you to choose a type of enemy, like I was saying. So beast, aberration, celestial, undead. There's a whole list. There's a lot of them. And whenever you try to track, investigate, or recall information about this type of enemy, you have advantage on that check. Also at level 1, you get Natural Explorer, which is basically the same thing as Favored Enemy, except with a specific type of terrain. So Arctic, coast, grassland, mountainous area, whatever. When you are in your favored terrain, your group cannot become lost. When you forage, you find twice the amount of food as normal. If traveling alone, you can travel stealthily at a normal pace, and more. There's a whole list of things that you get from your favored terrain.
So would that mean that Aragorn was an orc hunting ranger who favored the woods as his terrain?
That would make a lot of sense. Because
he was able to forage. He was a ranger.
Yeah.
He was I never really thought about that, but that would make sense because he fought and slayed tons of the orcs.
He fits the class very well. Yeah, totally.
You don't normally think of him, I don't think, as a ranger because he fights with the sword and everything. And when I D&D a ranger, right. I'm usually distance.
Rangers can totally combat. Rangers can totally be melee combat though, because at level 2 you're granted a fighting style, so you can choose archery, defense, dueling, which is fighting with one hand, like a longsword or a yeah, just a sword, no shield, not two swords, or two weapon fighting. So you get to choose your stands. They all have their own bonuses, so I'm not going to get into all those. Also at level 2, you get spell casting. So rangers can use wisdom as their spell modifier, which should be good because your wisdom should already be pretty high because you need high perception, right? So yeah, I feel like Aragorn would, by definition, be a ranger. I mean, I think he's even referred to as a ranger.
Oh, yeah, he definitely is a ranger because when they first meet him, he's the ranger in a bar.
Yeah.
But it's like I said, I didn't really stop to think about it because he's not what I would think of an archetypical ranger.
Yeah.
But it's like as soon as I said that, you would think I led you into that section. I
Nope,
did not.
was
Didn't
there.
know that was coming. And
that was coincidence.
yeah, because as soon as you said it's like right, so he would just have chosen a different style of
Exactly.
fighting.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so rangers can be archery or melee. By level 3, you get to choose an archetype. So either the hunter or the beastmaster. Those come with their own perks at different levels. Hunter basically give you bonuses to your attacks and defenses, while beastmaster allows you to have a beast pet. How cool is that? Why would you not choose that? If you're going to be a ranger, you're going to be a beastmaster, right?
What if you just coincidentally had an Onyx figurine that lets you have a black pet? Mm-hmm.
I think at level 4 you get an ability score modifier increase, or your feat. I didn't make a note of that, but I'm pretty sure that happens at level 4, just like most other classes. And then there's other levels as well that happens. But at level 5 you get an extra attack. So when you make an attack action, you can attack twice. You don't get to attack and then hide or something like that. It's
right
when you choose the attack action, you attack twice. So it's basically
that's an important mechanic too, because then you can't use your action and then attack either, because you don't get that second action.
Right, exactly. It's when you use the attack action, you get 2 attacks. Is basically what that is. At level 8, you gain an ability called Land's Stride, which allows you to move unhindered through difficult terrain. This ability seems kind of I mean, I guess it also gives you advantage on saving throws against terrain that would injure you, like tangling thorns or something like that. So
as someone who currently uses that as a spell, I would prefer they don't have that.
Exactly. Maybe you guys just need to run into a ton of rangers. At level 10, you gain Hide in Plain Sight, which allows you to hide in plain sight, given you take a minute to set up a camouflaged area. So that's not something you're going to be using in a battle because that would be 10 turns. But if you know that an army is on their way up the hill and you're just you quickly put together a little shelter to hide underneath of, and it's it's just a pile of twigs and leaves. I don't know.
Help, we're under siege. What are you doing over there? Taking 10 actions to go ahead and build myself a small hut and hide. Shut up.
I'm hiding. You guys are dead. At level 14, you can use hide as a bonus action, and you are unable to be tracked, which is pretty cool. As far as being in a party, though, I feel like that doesn't help that much. You know what I mean?
Maybe if you were willing to flank an ambush.
Maybe.
You could hide, set up, and they would walk past you, stuff like that. You could then come in from another angle. But, yeah, no, it doesn't seem nearly as cool as what you would use it as a solo action for.
Yeah. At level 18, you have the ability to know where invisible creatures are that are within 30 feet of you. That is cool. Even if you cannot physically see them, you can, see their footprints, or you can, hear them or something. So there's something else that tells you where the creatures are. And then at level 20, you gain Foe Slayer. This allows you to apply your wisdom modifier to either your attack roll or your damage roll when you're using your bow or a sword or a weapon or something. And what's cool about that is you get to roll first before you decide. So if your attack roll, you roll it and it's a nat 20, it's okay, well, I'm definitely not going to use it on that. I'll use it on the damage roll instead. That's pretty cool. All in all, I wasn't really rules as written. Ranger doesn't seem I don't know. It seemed a little meh, those abilities that you gain. I don't know. It seemed like it was more geared toward like solo play or something. Like if you were playing by yourself with a DM, but with a group, I don't know. A lot of the abilities, I don't know.
Or playing an RPG game like Morrowind.
Oh yeah, well, totally, because you're solo.
Right?
But I feel like
Baldur's Gate 3 probably as well works, but I haven't played that yet. So.
Yeah, you should. It's really fun. Now, I kind of stalled out, but that was only because I got the meta quest then. So I've been playing that. But yeah, as far as the class itself goes, yeah, like I said, it seemed a little meh. It felt like other classes would kind of leave the ranger in the dust. Not literally, because rangers are going to be pretty fast, especially when like going through the wilderness and everything. But
right.
Some of the other abilities that other classes get are just like very powerful. They do a lot of damage, or they benefit the whole party rather than just themselves. Seemed like the ranger was very focused on themselves. Didn't have a lot of like. Now, of course, I didn't go into any of the ranger spells at all.
Right.
I didn't go into any of the rangers. So there could very well be a lot of buffing spells here and there, but I just didn't really have like there's. Yeah, and of course, I only went through the player's handbook. There's other expansions that have other archetypes and subclasses, sort of things, but I didn't go through any of that. So maybe it's better than the rules as written from the original book. But anyway, that is what I have for my dungeon delve, and I think that's gonna be it for this episode. So thank you everybody for listening. Remember that if you like the show, give us a 5-star rating. Also make sure you're getting the most out of this podcast. Pick up a copy of the book and read along with us. Hey, if you don't have time to read, pick up a copy of the audiobook and listen to it. I was just talking to someone today about listening to podcasts, and they said, oh, I don't have time for that. I'm on a tractor all day. And I'm like, what are you talking about? If you're on a tractor all day,
then the giant hum of the tractor.
Like you have all day. So yeah, you can listen to the podcast at work, at the gym, wherever you are. When you've read the next part, listen to the podcast. Listen to the audiobook wherever you are. When you finish the next part, shoot us an email at drizztdoneright@gmail.com or log on to our Drizzt Cord to join in on the discussion there. Remember, we would love to hear from you.
Please don't forget to listen to Justin and send in your opinions. If you're looking for more ways to help the show, then we do have the link in the episode description. It says support this podcast. All of your donations go towards helping us improve this show for everyone's entertainment. So farewell, my friends, until we meet again. Remember, play fair and be well.